Alright, time for another draft science video presentation. I already made half of this video and then made an error. So, whatever. Really hate do-overs. So, Google's evil for lots of reasons. The censorship is just completely up to their own personal opinion. It doesn't have there's no science to it. There's no logic. No inspection, no ability for the public to know what discretion they're applying, and it's completely inconsistent. In the same video will be allowed on one channel and not allowed on another channel. Makes no sense. Just too bad. Too sloppy a policy to be acceptable. Yeah, enough of that. Baldy Catz, yes, coward. $1,500 is sitting there for somebody to collect for merely an hour of their time to defend conventional physics against a crank. You know, somebody's supposed to be irrational and crazy and stupid and moronic and all these things, and yet they don't take the money. If I put up $1,500 to defend evolution, I'd take the chance. You know, in a second, I'd be there. Why are they afraid? And that's all that can be, is fear, right? I mean, it's $1,500 for an hour's work, doing something that should be simple. Conventional physics should be rock solid. Why should they be afraid that I'm going to ask a question they can't answer, or provide reasoning or logic that they don't have a counter argument to? I mean, come on. It doesn't make any sense. They're obviously afraid because they will lack credibility. It's just a fact. I've given Baldy Catz a simple task. He's been allowed to directly make assertions about my character as a human being, and certainly my education and my knowledge, and he's overtly stated that I'm misinformed and different things. So he should be willing to back those things up, and now I'm giving him the simple task of merely provide a link to the video explaining the double slit experiment as a wave theory that can stand up to scrutiny, that is credible as science, that doesn't lie and it doesn't cheat, and it doesn't deny the truth. It presents the truth and shows the truth, and he won't do it. I mean, it's a fundamental experiment in the history of the science he believes in, and yet he won't show me why it's credible and great and it's a fantastic theory with the simple piece of evidence that should already exist. Tons of college professors, tons of people have analyzed the double slit, so what's the big deal? Why won't he put his credibility on the line and defend his argument with a piece of evidence? Not asking much. Alright, I'll do some comments and then we'll get to a video probably on the subject of lensing and Einstein's fame, probably, and other things. I don't know what this means. The Gordian nut is an intractable problem and such. Well, there's really no intractable problems in the sense if you have a big enough tractor, okay, then they're tractable. You just have a big enough tractor, you can smash the assholes in the way, and the only problem is people. People are stupid, and belligerently so, and that's it. So it's tractable in the sense that you just got to get them out of the way, the dumbasses. And eventually human civilization might grow up enough to know that that's what it has to do. It has to stop allowing retards to drive any buses. Alright. Thanks for those. Alternative scenarios actually helped me understand the whole thing much better. My completely unsolicited and mostly uninformed advice would be to find some sort of compromise that you can live with and could facilitate crowdsourcing some of these experiments. Yeah, well, that's part of the thing that should have already been done a long time ago, right? Is the fact that science has no desire even to know these answers definitively, for sure. You could just argue the fact that the Eddington experiment has never been done from space, even though space has 400 times, you know, according to Professor Lewin, you get 400 times the resolution of an image when you're looking at space from space rather than looking at space from the Earth. So your telescope is 400 times better when it's in space at looking at distant objects. And they haven't done it from space. You don't need an eclipse. It's 400 times better resolution, and they've never done the experiment. So this idea that the crowd gives a fuck about the truth seems kind of obvious. They really don't. Okay, they really couldn't give a shit about actually doing the experiment the right way and actually proving the point one way or the other. It doesn't excite anyone. We had a perfect eclipse over North America, the most technology, 12 noon eclipse, and one amateur did the experiment shabbily, and that's all we got. Okay. I'm not rich by any standard, but I have extra cash now and then. I would be happy to donate to the cause to test some of these ideas. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing, is doing it right versus doing it wrong, and really it should be done right. So, you know, yeah, you need more than your cash probably, or but yeah, no, I mean, there's only so much, you know, some of it's not that difficult. My argument is as a cheap and frugal person, most of these experiments, there's already people that have the equipment, and it would just make sense to pay them to do it. No point in buying, you know, I'd like to have an infrared camera for lots of reasons. There's lots of things I'd like to do with one in terms of seeing different physical facts and verifying them. But frankly, you know, for one experiment, it's just not worth me buying one just to take a picture of a double slit, because it's not going to be conclusive evidence. Well, I suppose it will be conclusive if it turns out to produce, you know, no pattern, then that'll be pretty conclusive. But it probably won't be that perfect, the results. But it might be. But anyway, screwing funding for experiments seems to be the bane of every scientist's existence. You know, what's in the bane of their existence is getting a career, not testing. Okay, they want a career as an experimentalist. You're not going to make a career out of debunking the conventional theory. That's going to be a very bad career move, not a good career move. Okay, so lots of jobs will be ended when they figure out that the Hadron Collider is just banging energy against energy, that the particles were irrelevant to the whole process, or that LIGO is a big pile of mathematical nonsense. It just comes with the gig. I hope somehow there's a way to make it happen for you. I would argue that I've already provided the evidence, that you don't need any more experimental evidence for some of these conclusions. The wave theory doesn't work for light, for the obvious reason that light does something very different from other waves. The single slit experiment in sound and water does not create an interference pattern. In light, it does, indicating clearly there's two different mechanisms. The double slit experiment doesn't work. In the wave won't create the two patterns, the waves, and clearly it won't in the narrow Young description of the experiment. So clearly the evidence indicates this isn't what's causing the pattern, right? Two waves interfering is not causing the pattern. So we already know that's rubbish, but they're still teaching it. They're still telling us that's the truth. This Young description is the reality. Now, the math they have in the back corner identifies these as the point sources, the surfaces, and it puts the waves technically here, right? And obviously, we know that that's not consistent with water or sound either. Water and sound waves don't create centers on the surfaces, and they clearly don't break in the middle of an opening. They don't break and create two waves in the middle of an opening, so that doesn't happen either. So clearly the math that works, that is the 4 point sources being the surfaces, is the truth. It's already, I've demonstrated it. That's what it is. That's the facts. Those are the sources. That's the math that works. And so we already have really pretty hard evidence that wave theory is a nonsense. And I pointed out the radar experiment. There's absolutely nothing in the geometry or the mathematics that would indicate that jamming couldn't be the answer. that you're just jamming the two signals. When you put two different signals, the same frequency, out of phase, then I'll not be able to receive it on a radio receiver. That's already a fact. I mean, this evidence already exists. You're saying I need more evidence? I don't know. This should be enough for people to have reasonable doubt anyway. This should be enough reason for them to even say, let's do some more experiments, because obviously this isn't very tied up very well. They haven't made this a real hard fact, so maybe they should do some experiments and actually see if, if I close one of these slits, there's a spot that's light, and then if I open this slit, all of a sudden this goes dark. Maybe they should prove some of this stuff they're asserting. So all of that can be done with what already exists as evidence, and they're denying that. Okay, so, and I'll show in playing this other video, the propaganda is strong. The denial of the evidence is strong. So what's, if they're going to deny evidence, what's the point of creating evidence? Because they don't care. Evidence, mevidence. They want to believe. They're going to force it to be true. They don't really care about the evidence. Alright, I remember the video where you mocked this magnetic model. So that's just horseshit. I never mocked a magnetic model. What I mock is the idea that electrons and protons are actually magnets. That an electron has a magnetic moment or a spin or any of this horseshit. So obviously when I said magnetic model, I was basically saying a charge model. And frankly, technically the standard model is a charge model, except they're requiring this to orbit to stay in position. They're saying it would fall into the proton if it didn't orbit. Where I've pointed out that, well, you can use magnets to keep something in positions and they'll be rigid. Nothing can go in. I've explained why. Now, no one's ever that I've seen, there's no evidence I've ever seen anyone else presenting a model that depended on electrons repelling each other to keep them from falling into protons. So this is these malicious lies, attempting to say that I have stolen something or that I have, changed some fundamental element of my theory is just such a fucking lie. So yes, I'm talking about a static model of the atom. The electron is not orbiting. The electrons are in rigid positions and they wobble in those positions. Now I could call it a static model of an atom, but you would take that too literally, right? Well, you said it was static. No, I said it was in a position, and yes, it jiggles. So yes, the position changes, but it doesn't change much. I mean, you'd force me to go through all this semantic crap. Alright, but you're just such lying scum. Alright, modeled by another dissident. So we have no proof of this ever happening. It's not a fact. It's just he made it up. It's a lie. Now you're presenting it as your own. So now he's claiming there was some theory that actually said what I have said in my video, which never happened. So it's just a lie. And claiming it was never discussed. None of my videos have been deleted. So I guess I'm just saying to you, show me the evidence for this assertion, because you're not going to be able to show the evidence because it doesn't exist, because it's a lie. Alright, and then the other guy, I had to block him because he was posting my address, which is just more nonsense. They can't stay out of my personal life. They can't stay out of making arguments that are just totally unnecessary, because they don't have an argument. I mean, if they could defeat me with an actual piece of evidence or state an actual fact, then why would they have to go there, right? They wouldn't have to go to all this personal crap. Alright. Alright, the video was about charge, i.e. atomic arguments. I've watched the refinement process over time. Your account is new. Your account is new. Oh, I guess he's implying the other guy is a troll and hasn't really watched any of the videos. Yeah. It's Farley is all it is. Okay, so he says here 16 isn't Mickey Farley. Sure it is. Nice try though. No, it's the fact. And so are you, Joker. You're all one asshole, and that's all you are. So dream on. Anyway, let's see. So the other guy made the claim that I stole everything from somebody else and all these claims. There's never any evidence for any of this stuff. There's no evidence I even knew what Lesage gravity was when I was already proposing a particle gravity. I had to go through the whole process of getting up to speed and figuring out they said it was debunked already. And I'm like, what do you mean you've debunked it already? I just presented it. How can you have already debunked it? And clearly, yes, somebody 300 years ago had the same idea. That's like saying somebody had the round wheel idea. There's only two ways you can go, pull or push, right? So if you're looking at atoms and you're saying, how are they held together? Well, I'm saying they're being pushed together, And it was because I already figured out that photons weren't magical, wavy crap in some sort of jello, So obviously they had to be made out of something, and the something would be pushing on things, and that would be a push universe, and it just totally makes sense. So anyway, this doesn't get to any of the core stuff. I mean, the whole point that I have now pointing out that electrons are basically just reflecting the universe. I mean, these arguments, show me where somebody else has made the arguments, okay? If I'm an electron and I move towards you, I'm going to reflect more of the universe to you. You're going to see more of me. If I'm an electron and I move fast away from you, I become invisible. That is, I don't reflect anything. So all of the stuff that would be in the field heading towards you won't be there because I'm not going to reflect it. And that simple argument of turning on and off is the fundamental argument, right? That a photon is on and off. It's not forward and then backwards. I can't make the reflection go backwards. I can't make the thing not hit you and pull, right? So we know waves are pulling and pushing. We know atmospheric pressure goes high and then it goes low. It's not that it goes to nothing. So we know that photons are different. We know that the mechanical universe is different. It doesn't create pull. It just creates presence and non-presence. It creates push and no push. Big, huge difference. I don't know if there's anything else in here that's worth... Again, it's just this silly, stupid lie that... so I gave him his shot. And sorry the rest of the thread has to go, but, these people are just such liars. It's despicable. Behavior. They can't make, again, it's because they can't make a stand-up argument. They can't sit there and just provide the link. Show me the other dissident who's got a good particle theory, and I'll show you that it's nothing like mine, and that I couldn't have stolen anything from it. And again, I really don't care about this whole, why would I bother? If I thought at one time D. Hilster, he started off okay with a particle theory, then he started talking about expanding Earth and infinities and all this other nonsense, and you just said, fuck that. Things going faster than the speed of light, all that kind of nonsense. So what's the point? No point in it. But there's every indication I'd love to find somebody else who was defending a particle model that didn't have a bunch of woo in it. Wooey particles, magic. So there's just no evidence that I would bother stealing somebody's stuff when I would show it. I would love to find a collaborator. There's every evidence, like with Miles Mathis and, lots of other people, that I've contacted them looking for our common ground and trying to attempt to do collaboration. But, they're just too obsessed with their own nonsense. All right. I already did this Miles Mathis thing, right? Wow, you are a fool. Miles Mathis is a genius. Right. It takes a real genius to think Stephen Hawking was replaced by a fake ALSer. You're a fool. Also, cut your fucking hair, homo. So he uses the word homo, and the icon for the video kind of speaks for itself, right? I mean, Miles Mathis' self-portrait is about as, homo as you can get. But anyway, who cares? Just too stupid. I mean, this is the best these people can do as arguments. Yeah, it takes a real genius to think pi equals 4. Oh, fuck. Alright, so we already did that. Alright, so we'll move on to the videotape. I did this, right? Yeah, I did this. I forget now that I've done it twice. It's funny how that works in life. You watch something twice and it confuses you. You know, did I watch it once? Did I watch it twice? Did I do it? You start losing track.
There's only one way to see the stars while the sun is out.
Okay, so this is kind of silly, right? So that they start off with a pretty unscientific premise in that, no, there isn't just one way. And the Hubble telescope is sort of proof of it. There's another way. It's called space. You go to space, you don't need any one way anymore. You can look at any stars, anywhere. The sun is just one little round circle, and it's completely irrelevant to what the stars are doing, you know, except for its corona, of course, which will also come up because of its omission. So he's first implied that there's no other way to do it. Yes, in 1908 or 1918, there was no other way because we didn't have satellites. But obviously for the last 50 years, we have had satellites, and they haven't used any of them, even though it has 400 times better picture. So if I use a satellite, I can use 400 times smaller a telescope. 400 times smaller.
And that's during a total solar eclipse. You have to be at the right place at the right time, under a clear sky, standing somewhere along the narrow...
Right, and again, he's not going to go into any of the details that matter. So this is some sort of Vox channel that's, 8 million subscribers, or some alternative to Fox, but it's the alternative, which is it's too stupid in the opposite direction, and a big propaganda engine.
Path where the moon aligns perfectly between the sun and the earth. When the moon passes in front of the sun's disk, it darkens the sky.
Yeah, and the point is it can do that in lots of different atmospheric locations. So it can be 12 noon now. In 2017, that's what we had. We had a 12 noon eclipse over North America. All the telescopes, all the technology right here. Didn't have to move it anywhere. Didn't have to take it to Africa. Didn't have to take it to South America. Didn't have to move it. Didn't have to do any of that shit. And nothing. No professional astronomer did the experiment.
Sky just enough for distant stars to become visible. There have been many photos of total solar eclipses, but this one is special.
Well, again, we're not really going to see this one, in the sense that we're not going to see what he actually was trying to measure. And what he's also not going to say is that this photo, which wasn't the one Eddington's group took, but they were both compromised by bad weather. And what he's not going to point out is that they have to look at stars outside the sun's corona. So they have to look at stars that are already in weaker gravity. The light will be passing through weaker gravity. They don't even mention that. Clearly he's not going to mention also that Eddington was hoping to get 10,000 stars on this photographic plate, and he got less than 1,000. 10% of what he was hoping for. A pretty degraded experiment.
It helped prove a radical idea that redefined...
Helped prove, I mean, again, this they proved it with what? Okay, as evidence. Really great, you got a great fossil, looks just like a Tyrannosaurus. No, they don't even say anything close. They got that whole thing where they put like 4 bones, and they say, look, we're going to fill in all the rest. It's that kind of proof. It's very suspect proof. It's very marginal proof. It's very marginal evidence. And not to admit that it's insanely marginal, hardly enough to be convinced by reason. Lots of reasonable doubt about the credibility of this experiment.
Gravity, and turned Albert Einstein into a celebrity. Because the stars in this photo aren't where they're supposed to be.
Right, so they're not seen as stars, so even that's a lie. They're seen as streaks because they're time-lapse photos. So he's showing us a photo that's a lie right there. These little points here were not what Eddington got. Eddington got blurs across. They were 7-minute time exposures. 7 minutes. The Earth is moving. Obviously, the star would be a blur. It would not be, it would be a streak. It won't be a little point. So whatever this is, it's horse shit. This is not Eddington's photo.
Isaac Newton laid the foundation for understanding the physical universe in the Principia, published in 1687. In it, he defined gravity as a force of attraction that draws massive objects, like stars and planets, toward each other.
Right, and the simple explanation is merely every time an electron moves to a new location, it's absorbing force to do that. It has to absorb a piece of energy for a certain period of time, and that's the deficit. More stuff hits it than escapes it, because some of the stuff has to move the electron. And the electron moves slower than the force that hit it, and therefore it absorbs some of the force's energy, and so every time an electron moves, a little bit of gravity is created. Fact. Or proton. Anytime you move matter in some direction, you're creating gravity. And when you move matter this way and this way and this way and this way all at once, then you create gravity in all those directions.
And keeps them in orbit. And for more than 200 years, gravity was defined this way, as an attracting force.
Well, yes, it was defined with no explanation, with the clear understanding, I'll tell you what it does, but I can't tell you how it does it. And that's Newton's clear statement. They don't know. We don't know.
But Albert Einstein saw gravity as something completely different.
He didn't see it as something completely different, so that's more crap. It's just he's decided to answer the question, what's causing the gravity? And his explanation is a gremlins, our angels, our mush. It's a mush explanation. A nothing of some kind bends, and that bending of this something tells electrons they have to go towards the center of the sun. There is no fabric in space. There is no two-dimensional universe. The whole thing is a piece of shit as an explanation. It makes zero physical, mechanical sense.
According to his theory of general relativity, which he published in 1915, gravity isn't a force between objects in space. It's
not a force at all. So yes, it's just nonsense. It's nothing's pushed. It's just magically knows I'm supposed to go there. The electron doesn't compelled by anything rational. It's not compelled by flicking fingers. It's not compelled by gremlins with wings that are pushing it. It's not compelled by anything reasonable. It's compelled by some dopey, insane nonsense about some magical plane of space that doesn't exist, that somehow contracts. It's taught as mock gravity. It's taught as if it's a constant waterfall is pushing water into a shallow lake and it drains out of the lake. It's taught as an impossible circumstance where you have an endless well consuming infinite water from the infinite waterfall. It can't make any sense. It's not accountable to any mechanical mechanism. It's mush as an explanation. It's garbage. It's worse than flying gremlins.
Influence of objects on the shape of space itself. According to Einstein, massive objects like the sun bend the space around them.
It's just too stupid. You can't bend anything in 3 dimensions. It just doesn't make any sense. It's too stupid.
So when
as a 2-dimensional fabric being bent, you're using gravity to explain gravity. I mean, it fails on so many levels.
Smaller object moves in a straight line along this space, it gets diverted because of the curve caused by the mass of the larger object. That puts one object in orbit around the other. And if Einstein was right, then the same curve would divert the path of light as well. Meaning...
Yes, well, if Einstein was right, no, this is a completely different subject, because now he's saying that starlight, unlike the planet Earth, the light, the photon, is twice as affected by the curve. Somehow the light beam is bent twice as much. It falls into the well twice as fast. It's compelled by twice as much bendingness. Somehow the light sees the universe completely different than the Earth and the Moon and an asteroid or a piece of dust. All of those things only get 1x gravity. All special photons gets 2. And not because of any reason to believe this, except for a silly notion that Einstein had that all acceleration is the same, when it's obviously not. If I'm accelerating each one of your atoms with a force, that's quite different than if I'm pushing you by your feet.
If you observe distant stars through a telescope on Earth while the sun is in front of them, their light, deflected by the sun's gravity, would make them appear slightly out of position. It was a revolutionary idea, but there was a big conflict keeping Einstein from testing it. The world was at war. Einstein lived in Germany at the time, but his work landed in the hands of a British astrophysicist, Arthur Eddington. Even though they were on opposing sides of the war, Eddington, along with astronomer Frank Dyson, set out to test the theory.
They didn't even talk about the first expedition that went out while the war was hotter. Couldn't cross a border to get to a location, blah, 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 blah.
They would photograph a total solar eclipse. They needed to compare the position of a cluster of stars in the night sky with a photograph of the same stars during an eclipse. If the stars' apparent positions had shifted, it would prove that starlight was traveling through space curved by the sun's gravity. The May 1919 eclipse was the ideal one for this experiment. The sun would be in front of a very dense...
I don't know how ideal it was. I don't know how far down the horizon it was or all that stuff. I bet you it wasn't a 12 noon eclipse. Not nearly as ideal as the one right over North America.
Cluster of stars, the Hyades, and that meant multiple bright stars would be visible during the eclipse. Planning began in 1917, and a couple of years later, 2 expeditions departed England. One, led by Eddington, went to the island of Principe in West Africa.
So, and nothing about the real truth about how this experiment got financed and why it was done, right? So they just lie about all this stuff. This thing was sold, okay, as a way of proving Einstein wrong, not as proving Einstein right? So Eddington was basically swimming against the tide in England. England was big on Newton, not big on Einstein. Okay, why would they spend the money? So the whole point was, it was to collect the evidence to basically prove Einstein was rubbish and everybody could go back to idolizing Newton. And that's, so they don't even tell the truth about what motivated the people to do all this crap. Obviously, Eddington was very biased in Einstein's favor. He wasn't exactly a very good judge to be judging Einstein, the evidence. Creating the evidence and judging the evidence really shouldn't have been Eddington's job, because Eddington was clearly a fan of Einstein.
And the other headed to Sobral, Brazil. 2 locations that were in the path of the eclipse and had favorable climates. Each group traveled with powerful photographic telescopes that could record detailed photos of space on the glass plates.
Yes, 12-foot-long telescopes, 12-inch glass, I think. Obviously substantial telescopes. When it was redone by an amateur in 2017, he's using a 4-inch fucking telescope. Eddington's getting 10,000, hopes to get 10,000 stars on his photographic plate. The CCD camera of the guy in 2017 saw 50 stars, as I understand. 50 to 10,000. I mean, get real.
Photographing the eclipse.
So 100 years later, we do it with 400 times worse technology. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That may require transporting and then carefully assembling them in the field, with the plates tilted 45 degrees on one of the telescopes to include as many bright stars as possible. And this was the result. This is one of the few successful plates from the 1919 expedition.
Yeah, the few that survive, and the whole reason why they didn't survive was part of the controversy, because apparently there were plates that didn't prove Einstein. And that's the truth of it. So they quote mined the evidence. They took what was to their advantage. They destroyed what wasn't. So, very suspect. So it's suspect as an experiment anyway. It's a tiny difference you're looking for, very tiny. And the weather sucked. The quality of the plates sucked. I mean, you can just go down the list of all the reasons why this is such crappy evidence. And yet it's held up like we proved something. We've proven it. We've done our job. It's complete. It's so far from complete as a piece of evidence. It's crap. It's tainted evidence.
Conditions. It came from Brazil. It shows the eclipse during totality, the sun's corona bursting forth, and the rarely seen solar prominence. Most importantly, bright stars of the Hyades. Back in England, Eddington compared the position of the stars from the eclipse.
So we get nothing here. We get no blow up of these bright stars. And again, they're not going to be, they're time-lapse photos. They're clearly streaks on the camera film. Okay, they're streaks, 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 streaks. So those streaks have to be carefully measured to know where the middle of the streak is, or the exact time you're looking for, where the dot would be.
Eclipse plate with another of the night sky, using a machine that can take measurements within photos at the microscopic level. The comparison revealed that the stars had shifted during the eclipse by roughly the amount that Einstein predicted. According to Newton's calculations, starlight should bend near the sun too. But
yeah, that's right. Newton never said any such thing, so it would only be your supposition that light is a particle that can be bent. So I don't think Newton ever said any such thing about bending starlight, light being bent by gravity. But again, yes, it's the same number as every other molecular thing in the universe. So when they say Newton's number, they mean the number that is still true for electrons, protons, every other, all the 400 particles in the particle zoo, except for the, I guess all the, whatever they're called, fermions or something, the photon class. Somehow they're bent and everything else isn't. Right? Everything else is bent just 1x. The same amount the Earth is, the same amount a piece of dust is, the same amount the moon is, the same amount everything in every material thing in the universe is, and only these photons, only these special little photons are bent twice as much. So this is such a lie to say this is Newton's theory. No, this is the theory that's true for every other particle in the universe, okay, except for photons. So this line is still true for every other particle in the universe, except for photons.
But if Einstein was right, that deviation would be twice what Newton predicted. Eddington's results showed that the deflection of the stars came closer to Einstein's calculation than Newton's. It wasn't a perfect match, but it was close enough to validate the theory of general relativity.
It wasn't a perfect match. It's not even close to perfect evidence. It's not even close to a good experiment. It's a terrible experiment. Eddington in his own journal says, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. When he's sitting in Africa in the rain with half of his photographic plates ruined by the wet. Okay, so he only has half the ones he wanted to use. Terrible weather, just awful. And here we are playing this game. Oh yeah, it's close enough. Shit.
Relativity and completely shift our understanding of the universe.
Your understanding. No, completely shift your understanding. You now have a new Jehovah. Okay, you found a new Messiah. And that's all this is about. You found a new frickin' star to follow. A new piece of crap to believe. That it makes somehow reasonable sense to you that there's some good reason that just photons and only photons are magically bent twice as much by gravity. When no other force is ever bent by any other force, when there's no indication that forces ever interact with forces, and yet the force of light, the light is a force, it's an electromagnetic force, in your own words or your own vernacular, is somehow magically bent twice as much. I can't bend a magnetic field, I can't bend any other kind of field, but now I can bend the magical frickin' goddamn light force.
The success of the experiment was first announced in the Times of London on November 7th, 1919, almost a year to the day after the end of World War I.
And again, they won't be quoting in that success Eddington's own journal. I wouldn't stake my life on these results. I bet you that wasn't in the article anywhere. The weather sucked. This was I only got 1/10 the resolution I was hoping for. I only got 1/10 the number of stars on my plate that I was hoping for. I bet you that wasn't in the article.
An Englishman had gone to great lengths to prove the ideas of a German.
So this is the big hype, the propaganda. Like this had something to do with, oh, we all love each other. And clearly Einstein wasn't a German. You know, I mean, he wasn't even a citizen, okay? I mean, fuck. This is just such bullshit, you know? I mean, he was Austrian. He wasn't even a citizen of Austria. I mean, he didn't claim any place to be his fucking home.
And the news that space is warped by the planets and stars excited the world. Einstein, who before this moment was only known in the physics world, essentially became a celebrity overnight. He remained an international pop culture icon for the rest of his life, and a favorite subject.
Right, and he was wrong about lots of stuff. You know, he predicted you'd never make a nuclear bomb because you'll never create a neutron chain reaction. You know, the odds are like shooting whatever parakeets in your pajamas in the Antarctic or some kind of bullshit. You know, nice enough, whatever. Einstein, interesting enough character, but fuck this bullshit. I mean, famous for saying spooky action, and that's all his gravity theory was spooky fucking action.
Press photographers. Observing eclipses continued to be one way of testing general relativity for decades to come.
Right, so this is all horseshit. Every one of these experiments, again, huge flaws. Functional, definite flaws. Either the eclipse is too low on the horizon, or, you know, you have to go through too much atmosphere, or they had the same problem, weather, or they had some other mechanical problem where they broke their plates or some other damn thing happened. So none of these got past the margin of error. So it's just more hype and lies about, oh yeah, we verified. No, you didn't. Didn't happen that way. None of the papers are written as proof because none of them got past the margin of error. Fact.
With more sophisticated equipment repeatedly confirming the accuracy.
Okay, so just more lies. So this, obviously, 2017, it was hardly more sophisticated equipment. A much smaller telescope, a crappy camera, you know, and star charts. They didn't even take actual control pictures. I mean, and they don't even show the images in the paper of the actual images of the blobs. And if whatever they do show, you can see the huge square pixelization. I mean, you know, the images suck. And, you know, and this is all just the hype. Oh, yeah, we've proven it. We've done, oh, yeah, we repeated the experiment. Again, none of these can be demonstrated to be good proofs. They're all marginal. Clearly marginal.
Einstein's theory. General relativity allowed physicists to begin to understand advanced concepts about the universe.
Yeah, black hole retarded concepts, like I can shove one electron inside of another electron, inside of another electron, inside of another electron. That somehow I can, you know, infinitely compress the space at which matter contains, and therefore create infinite energy. It's just silly crap.
Like black holes, which ultimately led to this, the first photograph.
Okay, so more hype, more lies. It's not a fucking photograph. It's a composite image. It's not a photo. Photo is a lie. This has nothing to do with a photograph. It's not a time lapse. It's not anything like that. It's a synthesized image. It has nothing to do. There's no actual image components of the damn thing. Nothing about it is an image. It's mathematical shit.
A black hole, taken in 2019, a century after Eddington first proved Einstein's theory with a photo, and completely changed our definition of gravity.
Your definition, again, only dupe, fools, morons, and idiots would fall for this crap as being anything like a rational explanation. The magical nothing is bent. Stupid. Bent how? At best, it's a convergence. Again, and it's taught as Mach gravity. Mach gravity is basically another way of saying particle gravity, pressure from the outside, push gravity. That's how it's taught. Because the only thing about it that is rational is the inverse square law, and that's exactly what Newton was pointing out. It just has to do with a point source. Just has to do with the fact that the gravity goes to one place, the center. Mathematically.
There may be only one way to see distant stars in the middle of the day, but there are endless ways to listen to music.
Alright, so there, he just said again. Now we know there's more than one way to look at distant stars, okay? We can do it from a satellite, no problem, no atmosphere in the way. No atmosphere to create a bunch of light noise. Alright, so you don't have any of the issues. You get 400 times the resolution. 400 times better resolution. 400 times better. And no one's been motivated to do it from space. NASA's never tried. I think they have, and I think they failed. And I think that's why we don't hear about it, frankly. Because how could they not have tried? It costs almost nothing to point one of their satellites and do the experiment. It cost almost nothing. So, what a pile of crap. So, but that's the science you trust. The science you trust is this hype and propaganda. And every single one of their bold assertions, their frickin' spooky action claims, their UFO claims, you don't require hard evidence for any of them. You just sit there and let these people talk this stupid fucking religious shit and you eat it up. Just proving you have no right to mock the religious because you're just as gullible, just as stupid. There's only a margin of difference between their stupidity and your gullibility. Okay. Until the next time and such. So depressing. So anyway, so yeah, somebody sent me this link thinking, I guess, that it had something credible in it. No. Thinking I was unaware. No. I have already been through it all. I've already gone out looking for the Eddington redo. And you won't find one good experiment out there. Not one. Not one with better technology and better conditions. Neither one of those two factors are met.